I spent the first year of my business with not a single client. Like I had put my pension on that.
Let's talk about that year. That's what we're talking about. So you're into the beginning few months and nothing. What are you doing? Were you just selling 18 hours a day? Were you
Selling 18 hours a day, knocking on every door. So that first client was a client I had like bugged and stalked for like a while.
Tell us how many times you tried to have a conversation before it happened.
I probably sent 20 emails and went to their office 10 times. Like, I'm embarrassed to say, but like, and it was
30 times?
Yeah, like.
Welcome to Bold Breakthroughs. I am excited to present to you today Seanice Lojede. This woman has been voted in 2 different places to be the single most important female leader on the continent of Africa. Goldman Sachs voted her as one of the top 20 women on the continent, and then she ended up #1. And then she's also received from another group, the CEO Global Award group, named her as Africa's most influential in business and in government as a leader of a professional services firm. She knows business, but she also knows life.
Welcome to Bold Breakthroughs that unstick work and life. I'm Mark Cook, New York Times bestselling innovator. Each week I offer keynotes that engage thousands, and teams embed me weekly to unstick tech pivots, sales prospects, and ops constraints. We roll up our sleeves in small groups to create breakthroughs on top priorities for each individual, in person or via Zoom. 9 global studies of over 2 million successes fueled my 4,000 wins at top brands. I've shared rapid innovation in over 50 cities worldwide. Teams create revenue breakthroughs and clients see new profits. Thank you for listening and inspiring your breakthrough today.
How are you today?
I'm really, really good. I'm really excited to be here. It's actually midnight my time, so I'm very invested in this, as you can tell.
We better start interviewing. So I'm thrilled to have you. You're so nice to stay up so late for us. I noticed as I looked into your background, once I found out about your awards and your life, that you have really done an interesting job early in your career climbing different ladders to end up where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if I go way, way back into my life, I started my first business when I was 8 years old. I was selling my neighbor's guavas. I don't know if you know what a guava is, but it's a delicious fruit. But I was an honest businessman or businesswoman even then, and I gave him a share of the profits. And that was my appetite for like just seeing opportunities. And I love building things. I love seeing things come to life. So in my vacation, my senior 4 vacation, which is when we essentially waiting to go into high school, I actually got a job working at a local radio station. I was super bored, so I just walked in and I told the guy, you know what, I'm the thing that's missing.
Wait, how old were you when you did that?
I was 16 at the time. And I gotta say, Mark, it was just pure boredom. I was just so bored out of my mind. I figured I have nothing to lose. And this guy looked at this 16-year-old who couldn't even drive. I didn't even have my driving license. And he's like, okay, come back tomorrow at this time. And I didn't even have enough money to get me back home. I didn't have money for a cab or anything. So I told him, well, if you're not too busy, can I see you like in 3-4 hours when you're done? Because I knew I was not coming back the next day. I didn't have any fare money. He said, okay, wait for me. I'll talk to you when I'm done with my day. And that's how I started my career in radio. I had a fantastic time. It wasn't a job. It was something I loved to do, you know, just talk to people all day, play music all day. Like, who pays you to do that? And I did that for a number of years, and I went back to school. I finished my degree, and then I got into radio full time, and I became a journalist, and I did TV as well. And it was wonderful. I traveled to 3 other countries doing radio around East Africa. And then I decided, you know, I need to start my own business. I loved it so much. And I think what I really loved about working in all these amazing stations is that when I was meant to give 70%, I gave 150. It was that idea that I was learning. It was never, I'm paid to do this and it stops there. It was always, what more can I do? And I was voracious. I learned about every single department, and they hated me for it because I would be the nosy one asking, so what does accounts do? And how do you guys work? And how's the business structured? But I was always very curious about commerce and business and how it worked. And I'm that person who, I want to know what's under the hood. You know, I want to know how the stew's made. And I think that curiosity and just that openness allowed my boss at the time. He was like, "You're always working. You're always here. You're always hanging around the building. You know, just matching the furniture. I'm actually going to make you a director." And I was 25 at the time, and I was a director at this company. I had no idea what a director does. No idea. So I Googled it, as one does. And figured, you know, there's so much responsibility. I felt overwhelmed, but I felt this guy saw something in me. So this was in Kenya at the time at a station called Capital FM, which is the biggest commercial station in East Africa. And as a director, you know, I'm sitting with people so much older than me, feeling very intimidated, like a complete fraud. But I worked so hard. Like I just did everything everyone wanted me to do. And I learned so much. And I think that propelled me to get really curious about whether I could actually build my own business. And that's how I then started Blue Flamingo with my sister at the time.
Why do you think you were so curious? And was that the only motive? Was there something else driving the curiosity?
Oh, wow, that's such a great question. Yeah, I always had a fear of poverty. So my mom and dad broke up when I was probably 7 or 8.
Oh,
and we went through quite a time where we didn't have food in the house. I say it now laughing, it wasn't funny at the time. And it was a difficult moment. So I think early on in my career, I was super motivated by never wanting to go back there. So I always understood, even on a very cellular level, like literally in my body, that if I can be useful consistently, if I can learn more than other people, if I can keep driving myself, I won't go back there. So I think fear can be a motivator, but at a point you have to get over that, and you have to be motivated by joy and by the love of doing what you do. But if I'm honest, at that time, I was just driven by like, oof, I never want to go back there. So, but I enjoyed it. But at the same time, I think the primary motivator was just, I don't want to go back there.
And so when you felt that and you got curious and you thought, if I can learn more, then I can be more valuable or helpful.
Yeah, I think when I think about how do I become valuable, it's really how do I create something that somebody can appreciate in a tangible way, because there's working and then there's actually adding value, and that takes understanding people. It takes you being empathetic. I would think of my boss and think, if I were him, what would it be like? The pressure, having to pay everybody's salary. So a lot of the time we think our bosses are mean, horrible people, but they're actually going through it a lot of the time. And I think that empathy allows you to step into a place where you're kind of able to forgive certain things. Like some of the places I worked at, my bosses were very difficult. It wasn't all roses, but I think the ability to just say to yourself, okay, how do I create value here? Not just and then just forget about yourself for a few minutes and just say, how do I create value here? And then it comes back, you know, you start to be rewarded. I think a lot of us wait for a stimulus and then we react to it. But if you want to be in control of your life, you cannot do that. You have to create first, and then it will happen. Like if you're sitting there waiting for your boss to be nice and all these things, it just doesn't work that way. But I promise you, like when you step out of your comfort zone and you go first and you create that value, it actually comes back to you like tenfold.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the empathic, looking across the table at a boss and saying, what does he need? What does he think? What would he love right now? In my work in rapid innovation projects with clients and in the research, we found the very first thing that you have to do is dig deeper into the mind of the client, both from a sense of inherent, innate meaning, which there's about a dozen pressure points that we help each other itch and pinch and push on occasion. And then there's also the fundamental business, just about 6 categories that we take people through. It's really exciting and it's really engaging and it helps. But we're usually talking about the external customer. What I love about your comment is you're saying that's what you did about your boss. I mean, not only is it an internal customer, but you're doing it about the boss. And what a great insight to dig deeper into the mind of your boss and maybe bosses, right? You probably were doing that to all the people that you ran around bothering, asking questions of. Is that accurate to say?
That's very accurate to say. I would always say, is there anything that I can do that you don't like doing? And there'd always be something, because everybody's job has something. And that would be where I would learn. And in hindsight, I think this is the other thing. I say this with all humility. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Hindsight is 2020. Now I can look back and I can give it a name and I can say, oh, that's what I was doing. But I think it was very almost instinctual and very self-preservation and selfish, actually. So I don't want anyone to get the illusion that I'm, like altruistic or anything. It was, but I think that sometimes sharing that experience, someone gets motivated to say, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not, my boss isn't always taking me for a ride. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. If I do something that I go the extra mile, I'm not being a rug. People aren't walking all over me. I promise you, it comes back in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. You're back at the other company. You're still being inquisitive in a PR firm, and now you're gonna think about doing your own. Just tell us that part of the story.
Yeah, so that was always interesting for me. I think it just sort of happened organically. It was tough. I didn't want to, for a long time, it was very scary. I didn't want to leave my formal job. At the time when I started my agency 11 years ago, digital was something that the kids did. They played around on the internet. Like, no company would take you seriously. And true to form, I spent the first year of my business with not a single client. Like, I had put my pension on that, right? Like, I withdrew my pension, and that was what started my business. And so I think that it wasn't an easy decision. So anyone who says it's easy, well, good for them. And I'm sure there's a few, but
I mean, let's talk about that year. That's what we're talking about. So you start your first couple of months, because anything, you're working really hard, but 2 months is what it takes to do anything, even a beginning. So you're into the beginning few months and nothing. What are you doing? Were you just selling 18 hours a day? Were you
selling 18 hours a day, knocking on every door?
Literally, were you running door to door?
Literally, I was calling, I was visiting. I was sometimes told to sit and wait, and nobody would tend to me. It was devastating. Like, you have to have a very thick skin to get rejected over and over and over again.
Were you emailing just a couple of people that didn't ask for the email, maybe?
Of course.
I won't tell anyone. Well, actually, we will tell everyone, but
yeah, now everyone's gonna know. Unsolicited emails, the whole shebang.
Back then, any social media?
Yeah, there was social media, but it wasn't like huge. It wasn't massive. And I was selling social media. So right. You can imagine how that was going down, right? Like a treat.
You're saying you're selling social media marketing and it's not even working for you. I mean, that moment, it was probably 9 months. In those days, was your confidence shaken?
It was really hard. Like, there were times I was like, oof, I don't know if I'm going to have to go back to paid employment.
And were you still believing in what you were selling?
I believed in what I was selling. And I think that's the key. Like, if you don't believe in what you're selling, you tend to give up really fast. With digital, I believed in it because I love the written word. I love audio, visual, everything. And the internet was all of those wrapped into one. And it was fascinating. So for me, I just had this feeling in my bones that this is something that's here to stay. It's going to change lives. So I never questioned that. So I knew what I was selling was legit. I questioned the timing I questioned whether anybody this side of the Sahara would take it seriously. Those are the things I questioned, but never like what I love to do. And I think this is the key thing about wanting to give up. The last thing you're going to want to do when you want to give up is reach out to people, because there's shame around failure. And that's exactly when you should reach out, because that's what I did. I called my best friend. He's a guy called Martin. Martin. And he was like, well, it takes time. And why? And he was so nonchalant about my failure that I also became nonchalant about my failure. And you have to reach out to people and you have to tell them what you're going through. The only way to combat shame is to bring it out in the light. If you keep hiding it under there, it just gets worse and worse and worse and grows. And then that's when you give up and you feel like a failure and you never go back. But just airing it out was like, whew, that's a relief. I feel like a failure, but somebody knows.
So Martin just thought, he's just like, what? It's part of the process.
Like, I know you, you're just gonna keep going until you get there. Don't worry about it. And true to form, like, I think 3 months after that conversation, the first client came along. It was massive client. And it was like, whoa, okay. That's probably gonna work. Yeah.
Tell us the story about having no one return emails and stuff and getting that first client.
So that first client was a client I had like bugged and stalked for like a while. And they're like, hey, remember we had a conversation 9 months ago? Okay, I think we'll give you a shot now.
Tell us how many times you tried to have a conversation before it happened.
I probably sent 20 emails and went to their office 10 times. Like, I'm embarrassed to say, but like, and it was
30 times.
Yeah. Like, and they're just like, oh, we're out for coffee. Come back tomorrow. I'm like, but I can see you. When you make a phone call and the person's there, like all those awkward moments. And at some point they stopped being nice about it too. But then they call me and they're like, oh, head office needs us to do digital and you've been bugging us that you do digital. So come on over and just tell us what this digital thing is, because we don't know what that is. And I was like, yeah, fantastic. I'll tell you all about digital. And that was client number 1.
That is amazing. That's awesome. You hear all the time in sales, I'm in, half of my world is in sales groups and half is in the operations and technology. And you hear all the time, like, if you don't get past 3, you have no hope, really. If you get to 7, maybe, but you better get to 9 if you expect anything to happen. 9 interactions until someone actually notices that you've tried. And you tried 30 times, and they finally responded. What happened? Did you throw parties, or was it all in your head, or what happened?
Oh, you should have seen it. There was a whole chicken dance that I will never, ever do in front of anyone. It was really good. Like, it was validating, but I think most importantly, it was just the opportunity to serve. It's like when you're itching to do something for someone and nobody gives you a chance, it's like, but I think I can do this. And yeah, there was like, it was a huge moment.
So you knew you're saying, I could help them if they just listen. I swear I could. And that's really how you were feeling. I mean, let's be honest, because everyone says that. Were you really feeling that?
Yeah, I think I was more feeling like I want a chance to show you that I can. And after a while, it became personal because they weren't returning my calls. It was like, if you do return my calls, I'll show you. And I've always had this thing about just doing things well. Like, if it's worth doing really well. So I would rock up and like for pitches, and I would print t-shirts with my client's face on it, because it was just, first of all, that reaction, right? People would laugh. And secondly, it's like, why not? Like, life is short, have fun with it. And I'm just that person, I'd go in for meetings with just chocolate and be like, guys, life's too short to be bored. I don't care if you're on a diet, here's chocolate. We'd create a huge big clock and put it on the wall and say, okay, we're timing this pitch because we know everybody falls asleep during pitches. We would dress up, we would do like dances to start the pitch. And it was just that people would remember me. They'll be like, that crazy, goofy girl. And I'm very tall and very skinny. So it's very hard to forget me, especially when I'm doing chicken dance. So it was just like, every interaction, just try and leave someone with a smile on their face. Life is so hard. And it's just like, just give me a chance and I'll show you that I can create fun stuff for you. And of course the work has to be done. Like we dance after the work is good. But it was just that need to just feel useful and just to feel like you're contributing that just kept driving me.
And in your case, definitely a unique contribution, because it was so hard to get anyone to do it because no one was doing it, and the wave was coming but wasn't here yet, and you finally started to get that first and then others to ride the wave. But you were truly a unique contribution. I just want to point out, when you had t-shirts made, they were prospective clients or prospects. Is it still, right? No contract yet. Is that true?
No contract.
You put their faces as prospects on t-shirts and then went in. Oh, I love
Absolutely.
it. That's great. You got this first client. When was the second?
Thankfully, it wasn't another year. It was probably 3 months later.
Oh, still on.
And then it just snowballed from there. And I think because where we started was kind of a very small town, so people do talk. They're like, oh, they're doing your digital. Okay, they can do our digital. And yeah, and it was a blue chip company, so it was kind of like, word got out. And I'm pretty good at like selling myself. So it was like, hey, we got our client. I was about to buy a billboard just to say we got our first client, but I couldn't afford it. So it was that just like that traveling word of mouth. So things got better.
Even that first one probably kept you busy. It's so much better to have one client than none while you're trying to get the second and the third, right? So things seem great, and then what happens?
Whew. Well, things were great, seemed great, were going well. The business was working, and then my mom died. And in short succession, my brother died, and these were, so I'm from a family of three, and it's me, my sister, and my brother. And my brother was literally like my son. He was the youngest of them all, and I raised him in many ways. I provided for him when I got my first job. I looked after him. He was living with me.
Do you mind telling me how your mother died and then your brother died? Is that too personal? No,
I think it's, maybe someone listening to this will probably relate. Like, so my brother, he wasn't, it was very sudden. He was just not feeling well today. And then the next day he collapsed, and that was it. And then he was gone. So during the autopsy, he had like a toxin build up in his system. And I was so traumatized by his death that I even refused to find out how he died, because I couldn't process the point. I couldn't understand what it was going to change. So even to this day, when people ask me, I'm like, what does it matter? He's not here anymore. And my mom, unfortunately, she had cancer, and then she had a tumor, and then she went into surgery, but she didn't make it out of the surgery. So after the surgery, she was in a coma for, I think, about 4 weeks or something like that. She was in a coma, and then she passed on as well. And that was just very devastatingly difficult, because I was at work, and you have to go visit every day, and you still have to, you've still got to keep it together for your team. You've still got to, there's all these deadlines, and you just got this looming thing in the back of your mind, is she going to be okay? Is she going to be okay? And then, they called me. I remember very distinctly, they called me, and I was sitting in the car driving to the hospital, and I just knew. They were like, oh, do you just mind coming? We just want to talk about your mom. They didn't say, well, that she passed, but I just knew. And that was devastating.
And so you walk in the hospital, and what happens? Does the nurse meet you? What happened?
Yeah, so we walked into the hospital, walked into her, I think there was a friend of mine, actually, a doctor, who'd gone in, and he met us outside of the her room and said, oh, mom's gone. And I don't remember much after that. I just sort of, you just sort of, it's like, it's so surreal. It's like you forget where you are, nothing matters after that.
Yeah. And then was it, you said soon, but how long are we talking about till your brother's death?
It was what, a year? It wasn't more than a year. Yeah.
That's so sad.
Very sort of one after the other. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that happened. That's really a hard thing. What do you do? Like you said, you had to go back to work. What was that like?
Well, when my brother died, I didn't get out of bed for 2 months.
So you took off.
Yeah, I was like, this makes no sense. I don't even know why I should, the joy leaves and everything's gray.
A numbness and kind of an apathy, and nothing mattered but mental comfort, which was impossible to quite achieve, but that was the priority and nothing else even competed with it. I don't know if that's something similar to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that was really, really difficult. And I just remember just waking up one morning after the 2 months and thinking, I don't think he would want this, And I think that was the motivator. It was that I'm sitting here feeling sorry for myself. But wherever he is, he's like, who tells you that's what I would want? And I think that just sort of, keeps you going.
Yeah. So you hear his voice metaphorically, and it's not what he wants you to do. Just try to suffer through continually beyond that point. And so then what happens?
So then I go back to work, and it's difficult, but at least the weird thing is that it's distracting as well. And I wasn't expecting that. So I just throw myself into it. I'm doing 20 hours a day, literally. Like, I think the other funny thing is when you do lose someone you love, it's sometimes hard to fall asleep, but then when you fall asleep, it's a relief because you forget for a bit. And then when you wake up, it all comes rushing back. So it's a weird place to be for anyone who's lost someone. But I threw myself into my work, and I guess it's that weird thing where things just got better and better and better, but I'm not sure I was getting any better, if that makes sense. So business is getting better. To the outside world, you're doing great, but it's really hard in the quiet moments. So work became like a refuge, I think, for me. And I outworked everybody, and I guess it showed. The business started to expand. We started going into other markets and buying smaller companies and getting more into tech and creating. I remember when we won a contract with Google to do training for over 10,000 people for free in digital marketing. That was amazing because I love to teach, and it was just great because it was like, commerce is fantastic, but actually doing something for people who might not have that opportunity, if not for the fact that somehow you've been able and blessed to bring people together and orchestrate it. That was, on another level, really.
Yeah.
And it got better. Like it's still difficult to think about that time, and it's still difficult to talk about it, because you never get over it, really.
Sure.
But definitely the business started to grow, and I now started to travel more. I moved to Kenya, and then I moved to Nigeria, and eventually met my husband. We got married, and then I moved to South Africa, and that's.
We could spend a whole hour talking about how you met your husband. We've got to hear the short version at least. So let's hear about how you met your husband.
So Fabian, my husband, and I, we met in South Africa at a conference. And I remember thinking to myself, why does he look so familiar? And I'm just sitting there thinking, he looks so familiar. And then eventually we get talking, and guess what? He's like the star of this sitcom show that's really popular in South Africa. And I had no clue the whole time I'm talking to him. And then when I get home, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I was talking to a celebrity the whole time and I had no idea. Anyway, so we exchanged numbers and he didn't call me for 4 years.
4 years?
4 years. And then eventually he drops me a very nonchalant message on Facebook, like, hey, how are you? I'm like, really? Lose my number right about now. But eventually we got talking, and as they say, the rest is history.
Well, I think we're going to rename this episode Patience. One plus year waiting for the very first client while calling people 30 times, and then we're waiting 4 years for the guy to call you back. We understand a lot about you now. That's amazing. But he did reach out. Were you kind and forgiving, and did you start going out, or what happened?
I'm generally a very kind person, maybe kinder than I should be. No, but yeah, of course I gave him a hard time. You have to. And we just chatted back and forth and just realized we had a lot in common. So I did ask him, dude, what happened for 4 years? And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. I wasn't ready. I was like, okay, say no more. Yeah, but he's an amazing person, very full of, he's very wise. He's very esoteric is the word I use to describe my husband. Very, but a very interesting character. Yeah.
You are a relationship person, and that's what you end up doing, not just for life, but for your work. And so I want to hear a little bit more, just one more comment about the boyfriend or the date. Like, I want to hear, like, how do you start or post all that unique stuff about the reaching out after 4 years? How did you start that relationship, literally?
I've always found that inferring positive intent with people always goes a long way. I think that giving people a chance to show you who they are is really what I did. I said, okay, it was what it was. Who knows, maybe I wasn't ready either. And there's nothing worse than, like, timing matters, in everything. I went a year without a single client because of timing. So I've come to learn that timing does matter. But I think more to answer your question directly, I think what I did is just got to know the person, extended the benefit of the doubt. And I think what that does for you is that it also releases any anger or animosity or negative feelings towards the other person, and this helps me a lot even in business. Just to segue a bit in terms of relationships and how to build relationships, I found that if I always imagine positive intent, that a lot of times we barrel into situations with no understanding. So your colleague didn't send the report on time, but you don't know what they were going through. You don't know how hard they tried. So always leading with, tell me what's going on. Tell me, if you're okay, or how do we resolve this? That builds relationships rather than breaking them, because the person feels you're extending trust and and they want to live up to that, right? And I found that even with my clients, the same principle applies. Extending them the benefit of the doubt if they didn't respond, if they did something, and I think that for me is a foundation of just human relationships. It's that I will always extend to you that you are good and you have a good reason for doing what you do, and people want to live up to that eventually, rather than getting defensive.
Yeah, they hear it in the tone on your voice, and if we're live, they see it on the facial expressions on Zoom or at the door in the office or such. Let me go one level deeper though. What do you mean when you said, "Oh, I got to know him"? Like, what are your go-to topics?
Well, let's talk about what makes you uniquely you. It's like how you made me tear up just a few minutes ago, thinking about my mom and all of that, but it was cathartic. It's like you get it out. And I didn't spend time on small talk with him. I said, tell me what makes you cry. Tell me the last time you cried. Tell me when you think about your life, what would you ever redo? And what are the difficult times? And I think truly listening to people when they say things like that, instead of listening to respond and to sound clever. And people know when you really want to get to know them, or you're making small talk and you want to make yourself look good. And it's nothing fancy or sophisticated. On a very, very sort of human level, It's just, I'm really interested in who you are and I'd like to know. And not for any reason, not because I want to marry you or date you, but because you're a human being and I want to get to know you. And I've always just been curious about people. I ask my clients about their day, not because I'm selling, but because I actually want to know their kids. Are they okay? What do they do? And that curiosity, like, I love what you said about people can always sense, because we're all made of obviously vibration and energy, and on a very intuitive level, when someone is being genuine or not. And I think it's just that curiosity, that wanting to know. I'm sorry, it's not very deep, but that's the truth.
No, I think that's right. I mean, searching for the stuff that matters, the really meaningful stuff instead of icebreakers. What is essential? I even had a client, I mentioned before in a previous episode, that I had a client call me, and we'd gone over some other things, technology and sales and some other things, and he said, I need you to talk about how to start the very beginnings of conversations. So it ended up a super invaluable, fruitful discussion about that tiny little space in business, which is the very beginning conversation. So I love what you said. It's really, really great. So tell me about Blue Flamingo and what you try to do. And then I want to do a little experiment with you if we could.
Sure. I love talking about Blue Flamingo. Could do it all day. So we are a digital marketing and advertising agency. And I think our main specialty, I like to do it in fours, is site, search, SEO, and mobile. So site is obviously your website and how that comes across. Search is how people find you on Google. Mobile is obviously your mobile phone and how you're found there, and apps and things like that. And social is your social media presence, your brand, communicating and finding people. And I think when people ask me, what do you do? I love that question, because I say, I'm not a digital marketer. I'm in the business of getting people seen so they can tell how they can help, so they can make more money and continue to make the world a better place. I think commerce is the most beautiful thing. Imagine sitting there and being able to pick up a device and some guy comes to your door with food. Like, our ancestors must be like, what is going on? So we've got all these people who are enhancing our lifestyles, right? So what we do is we get you seen in front of those people so you can continue to do the good stuff that you do and not worry about where your customers are or how to find them.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really love that. I'll tell you why I love that, because it sounds like such a cliche to say, well, you're going to do better business if you're helping people. But I've got to tell you, that's the only way that it's ever come, is for people helping me and me helping other people. But I really believe in this topic for anyone, to help other people more aggressively. And so I want you to use me as an example. I've done some clips on LinkedIn. I've got 1,500, 1,700, 1,800 followers or something on LinkedIn. I have almost no one on Instagram and Twitter. But because of how Facebook works with your contacts, I suddenly have 1,000 when I had like 5 last month. But now when I go into podcast world, suddenly I have to mass market. I'm in your world. Tell me where to start, and let's step me through what your advice would be.
Sure. Oh, I love it. The meat of it. So I think it's always really critical, like anything else, to understand the objective. And I like what you said. I know the elemental stuff. I know I got to help. I know I got to create great content. I know I got to do all of this. That's perfect. But it always amazes me how every single time it tends to be the simple things that trip us up. So when I ask my client, what is your objective? They'll say the same things, right? They'll say, oh, I want to get 1,000 likes, or I just want to have great content out and a lot of people following me. And then I dig a little bit deeper, like in psychology, right? Where they keep asking you why and why and why, and you keep going until you get to the heart of it, right? And for a lot of them, when we get to the heart of it, they're like, oh, that's interesting. So I'm like, that's your objective. Is your objective to, and this is the other thing about objective. We all did the SMART goals. We know they should be specific, measurable, and all that stuff. But it's almost like we don't practice it. So I say, okay, what is your goal for like this week or next week? Do you want to get 100 more people to listen to you? Do you want to get 200 more people to listen to you? And I have this amazing spreadsheet that we created. And I know you just talked about Excel now, so maybe this is going to make your eyes water a little bit. But
Okay.
it's this amazing little Excel sheet that just keeps track of everything, right? So you've got your like Instagram that you talked about, you've got your Facebook, you've got your whatever, and then you distill your goals. And this is the thing also, goals being written down in concrete really, really helps, because if it's nebulous and it's out there, you're never going to hit it. So if your goal is to, and this helped us as well in our business, because we were so good at marketing for other people and totally forgetting about ourselves, which I think a lot of agencies struggle with. And we said, okay, we just like to have 2 people reach out to us a month. That's it. Just 2 people reach out to us a month and say, hey, we're interested in digital marketing. Can you guys help us? And the amazing thing is when we just put that number down, we now had a number to track. We're like, we got 0. Oh my God, we got 0 again. And we got 0. What do we need to do better? And then we had to, I don't know how technical you want me to get, but we had to get into our SEO. And we had to say, okay, we're not optimized for search. People can't find us.
Now let me ask you about that, because there's a few places to worry about that. Would you start thinking about SEO? Because my time is super limited, right? I mean, I am just working nonstop. I have a project that relates to my personal website, and this should be true for just a normal person in the cube. And we've talked about personal branding for the last decade in business, and it's gone beyond that. It's now what you said, like you are a person and you want to help people. That's the fundamental reason that science thinks you're alive. And by the way, every other philosophy and religion. So if you are a person and your job is to help other people, you should have a personal website. My wife has a really successful little business, voice coaching. She doesn't ever have to make a sales call. So she's got like 2 pages. No one has an excuse to get past the website. I have much more than that. So I have a website, and I haven't done the project to make sure it's hardened SEO, valuable, searched well, etc. But that project's also waiting for me over on my YouTube channel and other places, frankly. So the SEO, where do I start?
Absolutely. You can't do it all at once, and you need to answer that question from the perspective of your audience. This is the other thing. It's never about you. Just the same way you said you're in this to help, right? That's the first thing that I learned. It's not about me. It's not about, sometimes it's not even about my client. It's about my client's client. So I always tell my clients, I love that you want that billboard next to your house so you can tell your boss that you're doing your job, but the person who needs to see that billboard is your consumer. So I think in this case, I would say, and I love this because I was speed dating, doing it with another client of mine. And they were like, okay, tell me in 10 minutes how I'm going to do this. And I said, give me 3 of your clients. Give me their phone numbers. And I called them up and I said, hey, what social media are you on? How do you make decisions? How do you decide where to buy? And they're like, oh, are you on LinkedIn? Yeah. Are you on Twitter? No. Are you on Instagram? No. Okay. Instagram out, Twitter out, because you're not there. So what's the point? So again, once you discover where they are, that's where you should be. So you said, do I start with my website? Do I start with my YouTube? Where's your customer? If they're on YouTube, fantastic. Spend your time there, because that's where you're going to see the return.
I would like them there, but they're really on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has to be really important to me, but I really need to drive people to my website and my YouTube. So if you had to pick between YouTube channel for what I'm doing specifically and my website that tells about my day job of doing rapid innovation projects with teams, which one would you start with if you were me?
Definitely your website.
Really?
And I only say that because, the few times Facebook and Twitter have been switched off and you're like, oh, what's going on? Those are third-party sites. Your website is yours. And again, looking at your demographic, if they're on LinkedIn, chances are the next transition that's more comfortable for them will be a website other than YouTube, right? So I would say the website is always the holy grail. And even when we do digital marketing, we start with your website because that's your owned, we call it your owned media, whereas the rest is your earned, because it doesn't, you create a profile on it, but you don't necessarily, it's not your real estate. You're kind of renting it from Facebook. So I think that is really critical, especially like with the podcast and all of that, that's important to you. So doing the SEO for that, making sure that's discoverable. And the other thing that I think when we're starting a business is that as with any business, you've got your expenses that you've sort of factored in the beginning. And I believe that marketing is one of those. So whatever the percentage is, whether it's 10, 15, 20% of your profits or whatever it is, put that aside, because marketing is important. Like, people finding you is important. Your brand is important. And that little budget is what you get to just get someone to help, someone to run around and do the stuff that you can't do, because it's all about that prioritization. But the quick answer to your question is definitely the website.
Okay. So that leads me to also worry about my email, because I own those too. It's a similar answer, right? I want to put together an email list and do the smartest thing with this, which we can bypass because we're not talking about the product. We don't have time yet, but we would want to create something that they would want to get and be thrilled to get, because we all hate getting email. We want to capture an email on the site or any way we can, so that we can send out with opt-outs and opt-ins and things like that, and get a subscriber that's our own subscribership rather than YouTube subscribership, which may not be huge. That's hard to get a subscribership on YouTube. And so that would be next. Now let me ask you what you said about the people. If you're a solopreneur or you're an employee that doesn't want to start a company and spend a bunch of budget, and you believe in me. So anyway, what would I have the person do first? Would I have them do data capture, like, hey, I'm going to anywhere I interact during the day, I'm going to send you the name, and you're going to use tools and services to fill in the emails and phones and everything, so that I can import it into my list management? Or would I have them doing the actual creative or marketing? What part is the very first little part-time outsource that you would suggest for someone like me?
Oh, yeah. So you're going to hate my answer here, because
it depends.
Yeah, I know, right? It's such a caveat.
It depends.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you my opinion, even if it might be wrong.
Yeah, it might be wrong, yeah.
Yeah, so it definitely depends, but I definitely think in this case, my gut is that you would do the email, because it's a little bit more intimate, right? And also it's a little bit more manageable. Social media is a beast. And social media, you're competing for so much eyeballs with, like, my friend's cat and that dancing cat and that funny meme and all of that. And what people actually think is hilarious or whatever, it's their spare time. So we go on social media to kind of just relax and forget about how dreary our lives are. Whereas with email, I'm going there to work. If it's a closed group, you're providing value, I think you can nurture that, and it's less intense. And once you start to build that traction, there's always going to be someone who finds your stuff valuable. That's the interesting thing about life. Like, I used to think, talking about digital and social media, everybody knows that. And then I start talking about, I didn't know that. But I spend all of my life with this thing. So I take it for granted. All the stuff you've said today, I've learned so much. And I'm just like, wow, he's so smart. But you take it for granted.
I fooled you.
You did it very well, but you've had all this experience that you take for granted, but a lot of people are just like, wow, I didn't think about that, I didn't know that. And once you start to nurture sort of that small group, and I think it's also about getting feedback, so you tell that person very specifically, once a week, get me feedback from the guys who are opening the emails. What do they like the most? What don't they like? And once you just start to get that traction, when I did product management, I did a course in product management. The first thing they teach you is that it's the initial loyal people that you must always look after, because that will grow you. But sometimes we want to get to like 50,000, but we forget, even if it's 5 people, as long as you deliver for those 5 people every time, and they give you feedback, and you improve, and then you improve, and you improve, it's only a matter of time before you're massive.
Well, I love that answer, because we all hear that you retain a client and it's so much easier and less expensive than getting a new one. But what the spin that you just put on it has added a new insight for me today. And that is, even if I reach back to the early ones, maybe even some that aren't even doing anything right now with me, but they think they're my client anyway, even if they're not paying me right now, they're going to come back, and they do occasionally. But even if I reach back to all of those old ones, the longevity now is, several years, instead of the one that I just started working with last week that I try to keep loyal. So there's, even on your current clients, there's a depth and a priority to the really old ones. Like, that's where you get to prove how seriously valuable you are, is if you're still adding value to them. I think that's really wise. My audience, my particular audience, is a mid-sized business leader, either sales or tech or ops in a mid-sized business. And they're the LinkedIn crowd. And there are tools, and I use one where I can actually get some sort of an email, but they specialize in phone. And then another tool specializes in, I'll just mention the name, that one's Lucia, and there's a lot of competitors, and it gets you the information. And there's another one called Norbert Walla. And there's really expensive ones that I'm kind of mad at because they're so expensive. I'm not going to say their names. But the ones for solopreneurs and people that are employees that want to become an expert at what they do and just do this, there's really cheap tools like Lucia and Norbert Walla where you can get the email, you can get the phone number, you can capture it in a spreadsheet during the day, because a lot of CRMs, it's really hard to go to all their fields and it just slows you down. So if you just put a spreadsheet together every day, and anything you do, you just capture the name and anything you happen to get. You just get anything. And then at the end of the day, you rush it through those two services, which enrich it and add what they can, and then you suck it all at once, bulk, into CRM, so you're not bouncing around everywhere in the CRM all day, and you've got your day's stuff captured, and you've got a little installment to your own email. If I could get someone to do the data input, like I capture the person's name and I capture their company so that they can find who it is, and then they go into LinkedIn and they, send a request. Then they do the Lucia and get that in, and then they get the email from Norbert, and they put the data in the spreadsheet. Send it to me. I don't want them importing it because that scares me, having someone else import into my database. But they could send me the CSV file, and I could just send that every day, and then I would suck it in with the appropriate tags, and I could add my own little category for a tag and know what it was for and things like that. Does that sound like what I should do?
Yes. Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Even if it's not the right thing to do, there's something about that momentum of I've got somebody who's doing this. Like that's what I've seen. Like you end up figuring out, okay, maybe they can do this, and maybe I can add this. So I think you absolutely should, because the moment you've got that off your plate, then you've freed up that time. And the worst thing is when you're in that hamster wheel you described, right? Where you feel like you're dropping balls. And then it's that in itself is stressful. That feeling of, I forgot to do this. So I absolutely, like every fiber of my being, yes, absolutely get somebody to do that. It'll just free up that time, and you see the benefits in so many other places, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to do that. I just want to let people know a couple of things about you, since you probably wouldn't say them yourself. I am really grateful about the energy and the personality that you bring to an interaction. We've had just a couple of interactions, and every time I leave, I feel more excited about my life, more excited about my family, and more excited about business. You truly have a unique gift. It's no wonder you were voted the most valuable female executive on the continent. I mean, that is not a shock to me.
Thank you so much. I've had such a good time. There's a t-shirt with your face on it coming somewhere.
The other thing I wanted to say is this. I think that the audience deserves to know that most of your clients are in the US. Tell us how we can get a hold of you and ask you to help with business.
Absolutely, anytime. So most of our retainers start like at around $2,000 a month. So that's like you're looking at your SEO, you're looking at your social media, you're looking at doing your basics, like getting your basics off the ground, your email marketing, we do graphics design as well, content creation, so putting videos together and stuff like that. Yeah. There's our website, which is blueflamingo.digital. There's my LinkedIn, as you mentioned. And if you want to email me, so it's just Seanice at blueflamingo.digital. Pretty easy to remember.
And the final thing is, you have a couple other things you're really interested in. Anything else you want us to know that you're doing? And if you need help, ask for it.
I'm really, really, really keen on creating more jobs for the future. And we've just started, we've had an internal platform called Go Digital for a while that we use to connect freelancers to work, very similar to like your Fiverr or stuff like that. But we're really creating sort of an African version where you can withdraw money with your phone and mobile money, because there's all those constraints. So I think that's my passion project at the moment. So if you have time to go look for Go Digital, if anybody is interested in supporting, funding, and creating jobs for Africans, I have a vision to create 1 million jobs in Africa by 2030.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Wow. I love that. You're serious when you say set a goal. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's on a spreadsheet somewhere, I can tell.
100%.
Thank you for doing this for me. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed it, please share this episode with a friend that needs a breakthrough. Post this on social media and add my website, or tag my YouTube page, or just text markspencercook.com to a friend, or message that link on Instagram right now. Also, make sure to subscribe on my site at markspencercook.com to stay up to date on all the latest advice on how to unstick priorities to create breakthroughs. I'm so grateful that you listened today. And remember, you have people rooting for you. They love you and want you to make your breakthrough. That includes us too. Take the first step. Now, you know what time it is. It's time to go create a breakthrough for your work in life. And we'll see you there.